Welcome to today's interview. I'm Mike Adams from my home studio, so you won't see me today, but our guest, you will see Matt Bracken, who is just a tremendous author and a veteran and also an analyst of what's going on in the world today. And I believe that Matt Bracken has the most important analysis of what's about to happen in terms of civil unrest, revolt, warfare. I'm not going to call it a civil war because that's not what it is, but the radical left-wing assault on America, what's that going to look like? I think that Matt Bracken has the best take on that of anybody. So welcome, Mr. Bracken. It's an honor to have you on today.
Well, thank you very much. That's I don't know if I deserve all of that, but thanks. Yeah, we're in the middle of amazing events, and the next few weeks promise even wilder events. That's for sure.
First of all, let's establish your books, because your books are almost prophetic, by the way. They keep describing things. I mean, things keep happening that are described in your books. So what's your most recent book?
The most recent is 𝐏𝐑𝐎𝐈, which is an allegory for modern society when the power goes out and civilization totally collapses. The subtitle of this book is 10 years after the end of the world as we knew it. I mean, the field of dystopian literature, if you can call it that, mostly takes place, during a grid down kind of event. Lights Out by Fortune, other books like that. Mine is 10 years after that. How do you reestablish an economy when for over a decade there have been no banks? There's been no fiat currency, is not even, is just paper and returned to its value as paper. There are no banks, no mortgages. Nobody can kick you out of a house because you didn't make a payment, because, there's no law and order, no justice system, no nothing. It's just you can hold what you can hold, and that's it. So how does an economy restart when there are zero banks? That's kind of the beginning point of 𝐏𝐑𝐎𝐈. Now,
what do you think brings us to that scenario? I mean, start us from where we are right now, pre-election 2024. What do you see over the next few months that's going to push us in that direction?
Well, I mean, in the big scheme of things, we're at the very end of a fractional reserve, banking system. It has to end this way. The economist who's most associated with this modern monetary theory, I'm having a mental blank out, from the 30s through the 50s. He said he was asked what happens at the end of this banking cycle. In the long run, doesn't it have to collapse? And he said, in the long run, we're all dead. This man had no children.
Keynes? Is it Keynesian?
Yeah, Keynesian theory, right? Which is now called modern monetary theory. I don't think people want to associate themselves with Keynes, but he was a childless homosexual and a trader a financial trader, long hold financial trader. But when he was asked, in the long run, doesn't this have to collapse? He said, in the long run, we're all dead, meaning my generation. I don't have any children, so I don't really particularly care about what happens to 3 or 4 generations from now. For now, it'll be great. And the devil take the hindmost in the future. Well, now we're in the future and the devil has taken the hindmost, and we're seeing the very end of it playing out.
Now, when you say the very end of it, obviously we see the parabolic debt increase of the national debt, the massive printing, $1 trillion every 100 days, the weaponization of the dollar around the world, which is only pushing other countries more quickly away from the West. The world moving away from the world reserve currency status of the dollar. Saudi Arabia is going to do business with BRICS. Turkey wants to join BRICS as a NATO country, man. The signs are all there, aren't they?
Yeah, and the BRICS is obviously a symptom. The BRICS is something that we see above the surface of the water that's quantifiable and identifiable. But it's if it wasn't America, it would have been Great Britain. I mean, this is the end of fractional reserve banking. This is how it has to end. like all Ponzi schemes, it has to end. And we're at the phase of the Ponzi scheme, where it collapses. Except it's not just,
collapse,
yeah. Well,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that debt system enables a lot of population to exist based on the debt of, financing farming and food production and so on. So a Ponzi scheme collapse also means a mass die-off, does it not?
Well, it won't be exactly a financial collapse causes a die-off, but the financial collapse is going to cause a supply chain breakdown, because the entire system works on revolving credit. Companies have long-term contracts where the ships are sent, trucks are sent, and they're going to be paid in 90 days. And everybody trusts that the system's going to continue. When this starts to break down, the supply chain breaks down. There's never in history been a time where, billions of people have been fed from food that's grown thousands of miles from their home. This is a whole new situation. In the
Yes.
Middle Ages, you had die-offs when all of the food was grown within 10 miles of where people lived. And you could still have die-offs. When Cromwell invaded Ireland, they disrupted the planting cycle, drove people from their land, and something like a quarter to a third of the Irish, were dead in a generation after the Cromwell English invasion of Ireland. And there was no mass supply chain breakdown because people grew their own food. So it's going to be a lot worse, because our cities today are actually kind of like artificial constructs. I'd like to explain that for a moment. And I use these analogies in this book, in a couple of examples. If you go to a giant restaurant or a big city aquarium, and you see the big fish aquarium, the tropical fish aquarium, the fish think that they're just living a real life. When they look at the glass, it's a reflection. So they just see like fish going out to infinity, because it's like being between two mirrors, and just they see over there, or these fish over here, or these fish. Let's swim around. Let's go down to the bottom. Let's check out the sand. Let's go up to the top. Some food appeared on the top. The fish aren't aware that they're in an aquarium. They think that they're in a viable, a perpetual, long-lasting ecosystem, but they're not. Because if the power goes out or somebody pulls the plug, then the water pump, the filters stop, the pH goes out of balance, the temperature goes wrong, the food stops getting thrown on the top, and the fish die. So the fish had no concept that this was going to happen. They think they're actually living in a real world. That's what a modern city is. The city can only exist as long as it's hooked up to external power, water, sewage to take the waste out, the trash out, and food being brought in literally from thousands of miles away. When that stops, these cities are going to collapse, and it's almost inevitable at this point, because, just to focus on the United States, we've built up a lot of enemies over the last couple generations, and you can argue about who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. The fact is, we have a lot of enemies, and what I'm talking about with a grid takedown, it's not exactly news. Sometimes people say, Matt, don't give people ideas. It's like, come on. The ideas have been out for years. That's why people write books like Lights Out. This is why these books are popular. It's not like they haven't thought of it. The Metcalf attack, which like over 10 years ago again, or now in California, I consider a proof of concept attack. They just shot at big transformers with rifles. That's all they had to do. The oil drains out. The entire substation goes out, and you can start a cascading, electrical failure. If you did the same thing as Metcalf in 20 places, you could take out America's power grid. And you don't think our enemies know this? We have thousands of... They
absolutely know it.
Yeah, we have thousands of people walking across the border from China, from the Middle East, from everywhere. And a lot of the Chinese look very intelligent. They don't look like refugees from Haiti. They look like guys who used to be working at the at the university, and for some reason they're showing up in America. You have another stream, which are probably Hezbollah fighters who have been told, your next mission is go to America. We're about to Israel's about to kick it off in southern Lebanon. And we just think, well, America's always like behind two oceans. We're safe. Wars happen somewhere far away. Maybe we'll have ration books. Maybe we won't be able to get all the gasoline we want. But wars happen far away. All of our wars happen even more recently. Soldiers get called up. They get put on an airplane. They fly to the Middle East. 99% of them fly home. And that's it. That's what war means to America. But our enemies are thinking, not only are we getting off the dollar, the BRICS, countries buying gold by the ton, but I think that a lot of these actors are saying it's time to take America out. And
so it seems to me, Matt, that we're coming up on an election, a little over a month away now. If Trump, let's suppose that somehow Trump manages to win the election. When I say somehow, I just mean because, of course, the Democrats are going to rig and cheat and lie and steal everything they possibly can. But let's suppose that Trump pulls this out. Then it seems to me that America will be under assault by at least two groups. The foreign enemies of America will see this time of chaos and they will go at it. And also, I think a lot of people in the Middle East, they see Trump as a very strong Israel supporter, which he is. And they even Democrats support Israel, but not as much, let's say. Trump is a strong Israel supporter. But then you also would have the radical leftists.
I'm losing your audio.
The enemy combatant. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, and you can have a combination. And I understand what you're saying. You'd have the domestic enemies, Antifa unleashed, et cetera.
Right.
And foreign enemies, these Hezbollah, Chinese CCP agents, other Middle Eastern, terror actors. But there's even a synergy that we see from the Butler, Pennsylvania, and the golf course attack, where evidently, and Matt Gaetz and Dan Bongino have been exposing this, some of the good congressmen, the Secret Service has been dropping the shields around Trump exactly when they know that there are these foreign attack vectors. Now, Matt Gaetz says there's at least 5 different, kill teams in the USA targeting Trump. And for some reason, the U.S. Secret Service in Butler didn't put people on the roof. In Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, they didn't guard the tree line where the paparazzi always take pictures, of Trump golfing by less than 100 yards away. If he had gotten from the 5th to the 6th hole, he would have been within almost pistol range, much less, a scoped rifle range. So you have this combination of foreign and domestic enemies where the deep state blob, they want him dead. They're aware of foreign and domestic attack teams against Trump, and they somehow are putting DEI hires in charge of the detail that aren't concerned about, checking out that the perimeter where the paparazzi always hang out. It's a real conglomeration of people that I think would like to see Trump dead. I don't think that they'll try another rifle attack. I'm more concerned about crossing over from the pager and walkie-talkie attack in Lebanon. I'm very concerned about, for example, battery chargers, battery packs on cameras. The pool reporter gets on Trump Force One, and somebody's gone into his hotel room and switched a 1 pound battery charger, battery pack, with one that's rigged with C4 that looks and functions exactly correctly.
So in one day, Israel, by remotely detonating those consumer electronics. Let me back up and explain this to the audience in case they haven't heard it in this way. So the government of Israel either planned the manufacture or intercepted products, then surreptitiously planted explosives in them with the intent to harm or kill the ultimate end user, whom they could not actually control, like whose hands this ended up in. And they then proceeded to distribute consumer electronics that the public assumes are safe. They distributed them to the infrastructure of Lebanon, which includes doctors, by the way, and medical workers and food workers and government workers. It's not just, quote, terrorists. It's a lot of people. And then they detonated all of that. Now, they just proved that this can be done by our government, didn't they?
Or pretty much almost any government. And it can be done on a wide scale, like what happened in Lebanon over the last couple of days, or it could be completely directed. I mean, you might order a new cell phone off of eBay, and somebody intercepts the package and loads it with explosive, and the explosive. But the explosive might not be, like you open the box and it explodes like an old-fashioned, Roadrunner cartoon. But it's just lurking. It's just waiting for a command detonation signal. Very plausible.
And that remote command detonation signal also, since most people run Google phones or Apple phones, and both Google and Apple are constantly profiling people with metadata, they know which people are conservatives. They know who's Trump, who are Trump supporters.
Oh, yeah.
And mostly they can tie your social security number to your phone. So couldn't they create a kill detonation list and just run through a batch file? Boom, just detonate, these 10 million people who are Trump supporters.
Easily. And it's not just for, I used the example when this pager thing was happening. Tomorrow 10,000 Teslas could explode. And it might turn out that they were all Republicans. That would be very simple. It would be because you're giving commands to Teslas, and then you're screening it by party affiliation or social media posting history. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying that there's nothing preventing that from happening. That's completely doable. And even more than 10 years ago, there was a Rolling Stone reporter named Michael Hastings. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this. Yes. He had done exposés on General McChrystal and other people. Rumors were he was going after other top generals. And the next thing you know, his brand new model Mercedes sports coupe accelerated to 140 miles an hour in a 50 mile an hour suburban street and ran into a tree and burned, and he burned to death. So since then, it's absolutely, there's nobody that can deny, even back then, any Bluetooth-enabled car can be hacked. Its throttle and its brakes can be taken over remotely. So they can do that to one reporter that's being a pain in the ass. They could do it to anybody, or they could do it on a wide basis. And Israel really opened Pandora's box with this. And, we spent, what was in the 80s, the Unabomber. He was an extremely bright, a genius. He was used in these Harvard psychological experiments and he was an unwitting subject, kind of a autistic genius teenage boy. He was used in these psychological experiments and became very bitter. He could have been he could have been an Elon Musk, but he was bent and twisted by his experiences at Harvard in these programs, and he became the Unabomber. Well, he was just mailing things to professors and to tech company CEOs. Most of the time would be like a secretary that was maimed by an actual just physical kinetic bomb. But the door now is open from millions of cell phones to one individual cell phone or vehicle, to be remote detonated. I mean, and Israel's going to be blamed for this, for opening the door. If if Team Jihad now says it's open season, and American tech CEOs that they say, well, you're providing the bombs that are given to Israel to drop on Gaza. So when the head of Lockheed opens up his new iPhone 16 and it explodes, they're going to say, well, thank Israel, because now that's a legit attack vector.
I know.
Our own talking heads have all approved it. They've been cheering. They've been saying, yay, very clever, smart Israelis killing all these Hezbollah. Well, when the head of Lockheed or Boeing gets killed, I hope that they remember what they said. Everybody
I
is
have
a
the
player
exact same
now.
reaction. No, I can't believe that people are celebrating this, but you and I both know that when people become pro-Israel zealots, they lose their minds. They lose all rationality, and they're just like anything is okay as long as it kills Palestinian children or Lebanon. I mean, we did an article on Natural News that Israel has a history of putting explosives into children's toys. That's children's toys, man, to blow up kids so that they don't grow up to become, quote, terrorists. I mean, when you start justifying these tactics, you do unleash. I mean, there are no more red lines.
And the whole region. Another thing that makes all of these events spilling into the USA more likely. In the Middle East, false flag attacks are almost like that's just par for the course, because once you start saying, just in a military context, you can understand. I'm going to start with the military context where people will say, well, that's valid, that's legit. You say, okay, Company A, we want you to attack in this direction. You don't tell the commander of Company A that it's a complete diversionary attack, it's a suicide mission, that the entire purpose of sending Company A over the line up in that area first is to draw the enemy in that direction. Company A is going to be massacred, but that's going to clear the way for a bigger attack in another direction, the main force attack. And of course, you don't tell the Company A that they're being sacrificed. Well, that same mentality, you take it from the military to political leadership in a country like Israel, like many countries, and you say, for the greater good, for the greater cause, we're going to sacrifice some civilians, but in the long run, it's going to save lives. So we're going to do a false flag attack and blow up a school bus, for example. I'm not pointing at any country in particular. I'm just saying this becomes a widespread tactic. So you almost can't trust at all when an atrocity happens who caused it. I mean, going to October 7th, the research that I've done, it's pretty clear that and I forget who came up with this term, but I think it's a very apt term, that October 7th was green flagged. So it's not a false flag operation. Hamas did it, but it was known and the door was held open. In fact, that the rave concert of Israeli hippies, Israeli hallucinogenic fans, was moved closer to Gaza. These are people that religious Jews would find the most disgusting in the country, pretty much. People that are like, doing a new age hallucinogenic rave party all night. They moved that concert closer to Gaza. There are witnesses up and down Israel that said, we were aware, we were warning, we knew it was going to happen. So you let it happen because you feel that in order to do a full whole-scale invasion of Gaza, a total leveling of Gaza, ethnic cleansing of Gaza, you're going to need a big provocation. And I think that that they understood October 7th was coming and they let it happen. There's obviously there was the what's it called? Not Jericho, not Samson. The where when it looks like hostages are being driven out of Israel, the attack gunships are told to destroy.
They kill their own.
There's a term for there was a it's a biblical term like Samson or Jericho. It's slipping my mind. Somebody will come up with it in the comments.
No, me too. But I know the term you're talking about. Yes, Israel would rather kill their own citizens than allow them to be captured by the enemy.
Right. So a lot of the deaths may have been from the gunships, shooting up cars. Be that as it may, I'm not excusing October 7th. I'm just saying, similar to say Pearl Harbor, at a very high level, at the Roosevelt's inner circle level, when he's being warned about the vulnerability of Pearl Harbor, and he's being warned that, like, let's say there's a couple Japanese aircraft carriers that left and are missing. They're off the radar, so to speak. We don't know where they are. You don't warn Pearl Harbor because for the greater cause of bringing America, which was at that time isolationist and against fighting in Europe, for the greater cause of bringing America into the war, we're going to have to sacrifice Pearl Harbor. This is
That's really exactly what happened.
Ethically, this is no different than a general saying, send company A over there and tell company A, you're the spearhead of the main attack. We're right behind you, but it's a complete sacrificial pawn. They're going to be killed, and you know it. How's that? Okay, they're all wearing a military uniform. Okay, so I guess it's all right. But how's that different than letting Pearl Harbor happen? Or the Lusitania. Right. The Lusitania, absolutely, in 1915, I forget the year, early in World War I, the German government actually put full-page ads in New York newspapers saying, hey, New York, America, there's a state of war. If you get on a ship going to the UK, we're sinking those ships, just so you know. So they put passengers on the Lusitania. At the time, passenger ships were also dual use as troop ships because they were so fast. No submarine could keep up with them. They didn't need an escort. They could just, nothing else could go 20 plus knots except for these passenger ships. So passengers are on it. They sent it straight through Submarine Alley. They sent it within sight of Ireland. It's like if you had to draw a circle on the map of the British Isles, where would be the most dangerous place to send a ship where you might get sunk by a German U-boat? It would be right where the Lusitania was sunk. They sent it right through where it would get sunk. And the purpose was, well, we're going to sacrifice the Lusitania, but we need to get into World War I. And we can't just write editorials in the newspaper about the reasons for it. We're going to have an atrocity happen that then we can just stir up the war anger. In World War I, they actually did total censorship. You couldn't even be against the draft. They arrested people that said, I'm against a military draft. What are you, a traitor? Wow. What are you, for Bismarck? So you couldn't even be against the war. Once these atrocities happen, total censorship. And I think we're on the cusp of something like that right now.
Absolutely. Let me ask your assessment. It seems like the U.S. State Department is 100% trying to start a war with Russia. Every provocation imaginable. They want a war with Russia. But then when it comes to Israel, I think the U.S. State Department reluctantly supports Israel. Like, they don't want to be dragged into a war with Iran right now, but they do want to start a war with Russia. Do you agree or disagree with that assessment, or what would you add to it?
I think that the State Department, Victoria Nuland, the Kagan Nuland gang, Institute for Study of War, all of these guys, they absolutely underestimated Russia. In the early 2000s, they really thought we can use Donbass as a means to weaken Russia. All they did, 15 years after, or 10 years after, all they've done is strengthen Russia and deplete our military stocks. So they've had a complete boomerang effect. 600,000 Ukrainians dead, approximately. Half of the country has fled, will never return. Infrastructure destroyed, going into a freezing cold winter. Then offering Storm Shadows and German Taurus missiles and American ATACMS. Well, I think that Putin had it exactly right. He said, even if these missiles are fired from Ukrainian territory, these are systems that can only be run by Americans or British. You can't just train 20 random guys to run this system. They can only be targeted using American satellites. The only thing Ukrainian about it is some stooge that's going to push the button when he's told to. So Russia has said, deep strikes into Russia using these weapons will be a red line, and our State Department and the Nuland Kagan gang, she's officially out of the State Department, but I think she's behind Blinken still. They think that Putin's always been bluffing. He's always going to be bluffing. But if you go further and further up this pyramid, I think the deep state is petrified of Trump being elected, and they'd rather have a war than an election. We're not going to have an election if we're firing missiles at each other.
Well, especially if some of those are nuclear missiles.
But going back to Israel, I don't think that they care if this war breaks out with Iran launching missiles at Israel or with Russia finally taking out, say, staging areas in Poland and Romania. I don't think they care. They just want to flip the table over. The lights go out, the poker game, you're losing the poker game, you got no more money, the whole pot's in the middle. That's when you flip the table over, the lamps go out, the gunfire, and everybody's heading for the exits. No election. I think that there are people that would rather just take a chance on turning over the table and have no elections. Clearly, Netanyahu is trying to provoke Iran into a major missile war where the USA has to come in and save Israel. I don't know what kind of back channel warnings he's been getting that we're not. I just watched a Daniel Davies video today. Very clearly, the pager attack was a pre-invasion move to disrupt Hezbollah communications and trust in their own internal security. They're going to invade. They're going to do a kinetic, overland move back into southern Lebanon. God, I was there in 1982 in Beirut. It's like the same game over and over and over again. But if you look at a map of Lebanon, about the southern 10% of Lebanon, when you hear people say the Litani River, if you look at a map of Israel and Lebanon, the Golan Heights, which are occupied by Israel, thrust up into Syria on the east. At the top of the Golan Heights, if you just draw a line straight west to the Mediterranean, that's about the Litani River. So this 10% of Lebanon, Israel is going to once again try to go in and seize this. But it's canyons, tight valleys. It's like Texas Hill Country or the Ozarks. Just full of caves, streams, cliffs, very difficult for armor to move through. The Hezbollah has something like 100,000 missiles ready to fire. So does Israel really think that they can do a kinetic overland attack, take all that bottom tier of Lebanon, or do they just know that this is going to result in a massive missile strike into Israel? The war ratchets up, and America has to come and save them. I mean, so whether it's Ukraine or Israel, I think that there are forces pushing us into a major, major kinetic war. Whether it starts in Ukraine or starts in Israel, I think that there are forces pushing us to a major kinetic war.
Clearly. But just as you mentioned earlier, the State Department vastly underestimated Russia's capabilities. The sanctions didn't work. It made Russia's economy stronger. Russia began to build out its own domestic supply chain infrastructure. Now Russia is out manufacturing the entire NATO, all the NATO countries combined in terms of munitions and weapons and so on, right? So it failed. Is it possible that Israel is also vastly underestimating the level, the competence and capabilities of Hezbollah, which also I understand has a massive tunnel system going across the border to the south, to northern Israel, a tunnel system that even dwarfs the tunnel system under Gaza?
I think so. They have shown that they have an ability to insert troops behind Israeli lines, similar to what North Korea allegedly has, these attack tunnels that where large numbers of troops could pop out in the rear. I don't know if that's really going to be a significant factor here. I'm sure it exists. What I believe is that Israel is trying to provoke a huge response. This is why they blew up an embassy in Syria, blew up killed the chief negotiator for Hezbollah in a safe diplomatic kind of a housing compound in Tehran. So this is really sticking it right in Iran's eye. The Persians invented chess. They're not stupid. They're not going to go for these kind of temptations that are being deliberately set for them. They know we can't afford to keep aircraft carrier battle groups just indefinitely on station, so they're waiting us out. But Israel is really attempting to escalate. I don't think that their goal is like they just legitimately think, absolutely, we want to get to the Litani River seize that lower, the lower 10% of Lebanon so that our citizens can return to northern Israel and live in safety. That'll be the declared intention. But the major goal is provoke an out-and-out missile war with Iran, where the USA has to come in heavy on our side. Same thing related to what we're doing in Ukraine and Russia, trying to escalate that war. Then there's no election. Then we can institute very harsh censorship. I was listening to Diana West was on Coffee and a Mic yesterday with Dave Collum, but Diana West, old Cold Warrior, great anti-communist for many, many years. And this is something that really caught me, and I hadn't thought about it. She said, everybody that, like me, I post stuff that could be seeming favorable to Putin, quotes by Putin, things like that. In 2 years, that could be a treason charge. Matt Bracken posted a pro-Putin something. You're a traitor. Right. We're at war with Russia. Now, under the new laws, anything favorable to Russia is now DOJ. Bang, bang, bang. You're under arrest.
Right.
So she's like saying, be careful about, expressing any kind of support for the Russian position of everything since the Maidan coup till today, because once we're at war with Russia, it's going to be total censorship, like World War I. You can't be against the draft. You can't be against anything, or you go to prison. And anything favorable that you ever said about the Russian position, that's now a treason charge.
Right, and this is a hint of what's coming. Yeah, but and then of course they'll use that to roll it out to vaccines or food or pesticides or politics or anything. Right. It'll be a complete authoritarian regime. But they can plan that. But remember, these are the same people that thought that they would be weakening Russia using the Maidan coup and then fighting, shelling Russian Donbass. They thought that would weaken Russia and lead to our success. It was a complete 180-degree boomerang failure. True. Right.
So these are the same kind of planners. It's something I've often said in the past. A plan to ride a tiger, really good plan to ride a tiger, it's not the same as actually riding the tiger. You can lay out the plan, but you jump on that tiger's back, the tiger has something to say about it. Going back for an entire century, America's main, and before America, Britain, our main diplomatic goal was keep Russia and China apart. Just keep them apart. Don't ever let the Eurasian landmass become one giant economic bloc. So, that's why the British in the 19th century, it was called the Great Game. Coming into the Crimean War, fighting with or without, on the side of the French or not on the. It was always to keep one giant first European power, and then to keep Eurasia in the 20th century, keep Eurasia from ever uniting. So we took out the Nord Stream pipeline. Obviously, as you've said, U.S. Navy job, using the Baltic training exercises as cover. Yep. They can plant a demo during an exercise, and it's just waiting for an acoustic signal. So some other aircraft comes along, drops a sonobuoy, acoustic signal goes out, boom. That's how it was done. I have no doubt about it. But that was being done to split Germany, the German economic powerhouse, from cheap Russian energy. And we accomplished that. But what we also accomplished was a boomerang reverse effect. We drove Russia into the arms of China. Now Russia is building pipelines, rail links, power lines into China. That's what Putin was just in Mongolia. That's like a route between Russia and China for part of China. So we've actually worked completely against our interest with this whole Ukraine fiasco. We've pushed Russia and China together, and the internal supply lines of a continental superpower are going to eventually, and already we're seeing, are going to beat the British and American power options, power cards, which were sea lanes of communication. As long as we kept the Eurasian landmass split up and separated, we could pretty much dictate economic policy around the world because the U.S. Navy reigned supreme. Before that, the British Navy. And we could protect, tankers going anywhere. We could set the price, go off the gold standard, go on the petrodollar. But it was the U.S. Navy behind the power of America. Now we're seeing this flipping, and this giant Eurasian superpower, which is now rising, because they'll have internal lines of communication. It's much easier for them to maintain these lines of communication. We blew up a pipeline under the Baltic, showing how anywhere in the world where there's fiber optic lines, natural gas pipelines, other undersea infrastructure, it can be cut. But cutting a pipeline running from Russia to China is almost futile, because when they lay a pipeline, every 10 kilometers, they lay like an extra kilometer of pipe to just sit there. In case there's ever a war, you knock out 100 yards of pipeline, so what? They fix it tomorrow. You knock out the Nord Stream pipeline, it's going to take a decade or maybe never. And when we took out Nord Stream, we flipped the equation on Europe. Oh, you're not going to get the Russian gas anymore. I guess you're going to have to buy the LNG from Louisiana and tanker. But it has to go into a gasification or a liquefaction plant in Texas or Louisiana, get put on a ship at 10 times the cost to go to only a handful of gasification sites in Europe. A handful, very few. They take a decade to build. They cost billions of dollars. One missile takes it out. So
plus on top
you can
of that,
see how fragile the sea lanes are now compared to just internal lines of communication over the land between Russia and China.
Well, 100%. And the fact that the U.S. knocked out Nord Stream means that countries like Germany no longer have affordable energy for industrial output of military gear. And Germany has lost BASF. They've lost Volkswagen is now moving away from Germany. France has lost half of its industry. I mean, it's just as the U.S. was willing to sacrifice
the biggest fertilizer plant in the world that Michael Young speaks of frequently.
BASF, yes. Exactly. So Western Europe was sacrificed by the United States to try to weaken
Absolutely.
Russia. And it failed. All it did was destroy Europe. Ukraine is lost. Russia is stronger than ever, and the U.S. has more debt than ever. And like you say, the loss of sea lanes, think about the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Malacca, and also, of course, Panama. I mean, the U.S. is
which can be cut at any time by anybody.
That's right. So this whole globalization of trade is only made possible by the projection of naval power, which means mobility throughout the world's oceans, and that's being cut off for the U.S.
But meanwhile, you're hooking, Russian know-how, technology. I mean, they're the first ones to reach hypersonics, to field them on planes, trucks, submarines, and ships. We're still trying to develop prototypes. They've fielded them, so they've jumped a generation ahead. This is sort of like the first guys to get the machine gun. That may only last for a decade, but the decade when you have the Maxim gun. It's a famous poem, about the Hottentots. Why did the British win? I forget the rhyme, but it's because we have the Maxim gun and they have not. For the decade that they're throwing spears and single shot rifles and we have a Maxim gun, you take over Africa, right? And that control of Africa lasts a century. Well, the Russians now have hypersonics and we're still acting like America is the global superpower. Our aircraft carriers have become a joke, an expensive joke. They cannot project power beyond where they can be destroyed. Their carrier air patrol, I forget the acronym, but it's CAP. The range at which they can protect the carrier does not extend as far as their adversaries' land-based weapons to attack the carrier.
That's right.
So they're like World War II battleships in effect. That's why we can't risk them in the Red Sea, for example. So even the Houthis, supplied by Iran and now I think Russia if the Houthis really did fire hypersonic at Israel, if that was a legit attack last week, that means that Putin has made good on his threat to start sharing his technology with third-party allies. So you can see how this is now entwining Israel, Iran, Yemen directly to Russia, Ukraine, ATACMS and Storm Shadows. We're threatening to send Storm Shadows deep into Russia. I'm not sure what hit that missile, the depot west of Moscow the other night, may have been, but they're providing hypersonics to Yemen to fire at Israel. Look at how these two theaters are intertwined. And we can't, so right now the Red Sea is out if you're an American or Israeli ally. Can't use it. That cut off thousands of miles compared to going around Africa. And going around Africa is not only taking longer, so a ship can make, say, 5 trips a year between Europe and China. Now it can only make 4. But the ships are also beat the hell going around Cape of Good Hope. It's rough. It's not like the calm Red Sea. So the ships take a lot of damage, which needs to be repaired, and they require greater maintenance. They lose containers, rolling all over the place. So we are losing the friction of trade. We're losing by losing the Red Sea. So throwing our weight around, throwing rocks through people's windows. Now they've taken the Red Sea away from us. Meantime, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, no, I was going to satirically say, but Kamala says she'll just set price controls and that'll solve everything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So and then we're right back to the end of fiat,
Right.
Are we going to have hyperinflation, stagflation, dragflation?
But I want to get to, in the minutes that we have left here, Matt, I want to talk more domestically in the U.S., what people can expect, because there are, we've seen the radicalization of the left. They've been turned into steaming mad zombies by the corporate media that want to kill Trump. They want to kill any Trump supporter. And yet they themselves tend to not be very proficient in weapons, by the way. But what does it look like when whatever breaks big here, when the systems that we come to rely on just don't work the next day? What starts to happen domestically in America?
Yeah, they may not be good tactically, at playing paintball versus conservatives. That doesn't really matter. Paintball or real guns doesn't really matter, because we live. All of our standard of living is a result of living in a high trust society. Trains and trucks just flow. Nobody's trying to stop them. With a, not to give people ideas, but with a bag of Sackcrete cement, you can derail a train. And we've seen that in Washington State occasionally, where
radical leftists like spiking the tracks and doing crazy things like that. We've seen that.
Well, the switches. Yeah. So once even if they lose or win street battles, doesn't matter as much as when people start attacking supply chains directly. When people start, like, say, somebody might say, nobody's going to drive a truck into here. So you just wait up in the on the overpass or up on a bluff and start sniping at the drivers of 18-wheelers. Well, that ends the food coming to your store.
Right. Totally.
See, we live in we are angry at everybody, like talking Civil War, but everything we eat depends on living in a high trust, social climate where we cooperate. When that breaks down, the supply chains break down. It won't take long. If the stores are looted in our big cities, it'll be mass anarchy moving out to the stores that are still supplied. Our supermarkets are only able to be supplied in a high trust environment. You can only send a 50-foot tractor trailer full of food into a downtown supermarket because nobody's trying to attack it and loot it, as we've seen in places like once that breaks down.
Take us to the next step. Yeah.
Well, this is this book, Doomsday Reef. It's 10 years after that. So supply chains break down, cities, it's like pulling the plug on the aquarium or the cruise ship running aground on the reef and not getting rescued. The cities will depopulate because the people are going to go out of their minds. When you talk about cannibalism, you have to separate it into like different scenarios. The most benign kind of a cannibalism scenario is like the Andes plane crash in the 70s.
Right.
It's in the snow, so the dead people are on ice, literally. They already were dead. You didn't have to kill anybody. Now you're starving, so you just move to the next step, but very slowly and deliberately. Or Donner Pass kind of situation, or a lifeboat after the whaling ship is sunk. But it can happen very fast also. If a city runs out of food because all the supermarkets are looted, we already have people that are ready to loot stores for fun. Like, there's no social inhibition on them defying all of our accepted norms and just looting a store. That doesn't even exist today with the systems running. When there's no running water coming out of the tap, when there's no food at the store, a significant percentage of our people will go, I use the term murder cannibal. This is hunting people for food. And especially if they've been brainwashed, like kind of almost like a Radio Rwanda level of racial hatred brainwashing that went on with Radio Rwanda. It's well worth looking at, the Tutsis and the Hutus. You can say, well, they were all black. Well, not to them. To them, the Tutsis were very different than the Hutus. So they did a period of agitation propaganda to make the Hutus just hate the Tutsis. And when the message went out, it was machetes and slaughter. Well, look at what's happened in this country. You have people willing to just knock out a white person or an Asian person on the street because their hatred has been inculcated through the media. When there's no food, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, when there's no food. So cities are going to be, that's why I always say, get away from the blue zones, the blue hives, get away from them. Because when the supply chains break down, it won't take long for the water to stop flowing because it'll be too dangerous. The engineers at the water plant aren't going to run the gauntlet going through Murder Alley to get to their job. They're going to so the water stops flowing. The fuel doesn't get delivered to the water plants. The new filters don't get delivered. So we take for granted that you turn the tap and clean drinking water comes out. And sometimes in a civil war, like say Northern Ireland, a very low intensity civil war, there's bombings and snipings, but basically the city of Belfast and London and Derry, they're still functioning. People are still going to work, right? The SAS and the IRA are playing dirty war, but there's still water in the taps. We can go into a situation where there's no water coming out of the tap. And then all bets are off, completely off.
And it's very conceivable now this could happen this calendar year in many cities.
Well, and our enemies know this. And the fact that we have now multiple foreign groups in the country, anytime that you can disguise something by leaving a false trail, it increases the odds that it's going to happen. And I use the example, like you fire a missile from Siberia, at Nebraska. As soon as the missile is up above the ground in Siberia, NORAD is tracking it and knows exactly where it came from, and we're ready to fire back at it. But if we have a grid attack, even if it's something as primitive as 20 Metcalf attacks happening the same night, the odds are it will be falsely attributed. I mean, it could be our own deep state actors doing it to blame it on Russia. It could be the Chinese doing it and blaming it on Iran. So when you think you can get away with not being blamed for an attack because there are so many enemies, it's like not Hercule Poirot, who's the 10 Little Indians. Everybody on the train is a suspect. Everybody wanted to. What's that? Is it Hercule Poirot? But everybody on the train had a motive to kill the guy, it turns out, right? Everybody did something to try to kill that guy because he had enemies. Well, that's where we are in the USA. So if the power goes down, whoever the FBI says did it probably didn't do it. You know, we saw with some of the Russian quote unquote cyber attacks, even the DNC so-called computer hacking, that the CIA can write a program to make it look like it came from Russia.
Sure.
Right? They can
That's right.
They can hit a button on the program, make it look like it came from Iran. Now it looks like it was all typed on Persian computers, came through all of these cutout countries. So
that's right.
Laying a false trail is like SOP now. So if the power goes out, we won't know who did it. And it'll probably be blamed on MAGA Republican J6ers.
Probably.
That's probably who it'll be blamed on. But it won't matter, because once the power goes out, the federal government will lose control in a week. And it'll be chaos in every city if something like that happens.
So given that we are maybe 40-something days away from the election, we got to count our blessings every day that we wake up and the power's on.
That's right. Every day with running water. Take a shower and think, what if this is my last shower?
Yeah, because I have a feeling that's going to happen for a lot of people. Tell our audience how they can follow you on X and where else they can find your work.
Yeah, I'm on X. I'm Matt Bracken 48, and I'm just Matt Bracken on Gab. I always parallel post because I've been banned enough on X to know that the blessings of Elon Musk may not be eternal. He could be the quote unquote former FBI moderators are still there, right?
Yeah.
They're just waiting for a new regime to come in and say, Elon Musk, we're forcing you to sell it. Elon Musk, I love the guy, but he's got so many government contracts, Starlink, et cetera, that X is just one of his concerns. So we could see mass bannings from X easily. So I recommend people get on Gab and other social media. Use Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon is solid, even though your links are not allowed.
Yeah, I know. And we had to sue Twitter over those links, and that lawsuit's still pending. But yeah. I agree with you. I mean, but we have Brighteon.io also, which is uncensorable, and Gab is great. Rumble's a great destination as well. So yeah, use all the platforms. But
I recommend everybody follow Health Ranger Mike Adams, because you're always trying to lead the way into these new unbreakable, uncensorable programs. So it's definitely worth a close follow. I mean, just the information about the ultraviolet lasers that show today. These are, and even if it's not like directly being used against Trump, you could absolutely see this at like a MAGA rally during some disputed election results. You could see somebody just phasing this thing across where hundreds of Americans are looking and blinding them. This technology is
absolutely out there. And I heard back. I got that information over to Trump's team. I heard back from them indirectly, and the message was that they thanked me for the analysis because they were not aware of a UV laser attack vector, because it's invisible and silent, right? So there are things that, like you and I, Matt, I mean, we tend to be a lot more analytical than most people. We read and study a lot. We're very technical. That's not actually very common. Most people don't necessarily, they may not see the same weaponization of tech that you and I might notice. And that's why you're such a great author.
And since the Butler near miss, seeing just how incompetent the United States Secret Service is, a lot of executive protection was based on the notion that the Secret Service was just so competent. Don't even try to sneak a weapon within a mile of a Trump rally, because there's probably some sensors in the bushes. You're going to get jumped. Now we know that's absolutely a facade. Absolutely, right. It's an empty facade. So a lot more people are going to now think, well, there's really nothing to stop us from, for example, even not even the UV laser, but just the green lasers that you can buy can totally blind people. We saw that in Seattle and Portland. They were using
That's right. I remember that.
Just green lasers will blind you.
Absolutely. And they're easier to aim than the invisible lasers too.
That's right. Yep.
Jeez.
And other weapons that we've seen from these, from the rallies, just, common fireworks that are called mortars that fire up in the air a few hundred feet and then explode.
Yeah.
They fire up in the air a few hundred feet because you drop them into a tube and then light the long fuse.
Yeah.
But if you don't drop it into the tube, but instead you throw it into somebody's car window, it's like a grenade. It's a terrible thing.
Good.
And they were doing that in Portland, and we should expect that kind of tactic. Just throwing the 4th of July mortar fireworks, throwing them as grenades, very dangerous.
Yep. I think we're headed for some very difficult times.
They'll use these. Yeah,
absolutely, they will. Well, let's pray for America and pray that we can get through this and restore our constitutional republic and the rule of law. And I would just urge our viewers, if you're living in a blue city, in a blue state, it might be a suicide mission to stay there. Seriously. Yeah. I've urged people to get out for many years, and that window is about maybe less than 40 days at this point. So
move to Texas, move to Florida, move to Idaho, northern Idaho, Montana.
Yep.
Don't be the last guy in your city in Chicago or in your suburb in Chicago.
Right.
Don't be that guy.
Right, well, Matt, you're an extraordinary author. In addition to Doomsday Reef, what are the previous books that you wrote?
Well, the first one was this one, which is a false flag stadium attack, where just like the Palm Beach golf course, the guy used an SKS with an extended magazine and a scope. I thought that was highly ironic. My next book was this. That could never happen. The Southwest being taken over by cartels, and anyway, I have 6 novels and a collection of short stories and essays out. But you can find me on X. My website is enemiesforeignanddomestic.com, and you can order my books snail mail. You can get them through Amazon. Amazon, if you want the Kindle version or the Audible audiobook versions, you have to use Amazon. But if you get them directly from me, I'll sign them, and if you use my PayPal, that's the quickest. Because I get a PayPal order, It goes out the next day.
All right. Fantastic. And then again, Matt Bracken 48 on X, correct?
Correct. That's
is there an underscore or anything, or is it just?
I think there might be an underscore between Matt and Bracken.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
So there may be an underscore. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Matt, for your time today and for all that you do. I think your analysis is spot on. I encourage people to follow you on X, because as events unfold, Matt, you have usually the very best take on something that has just happened. And I'm often chiming in, with you or sharing your post, because we're all trying to make sense of it in real time. But you have a lot of
Roger
great
that
reactions.
and big dittos to that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Have a great afternoon, and God bless you. Take care now.